everybody give Bruce Wechtenheiser a hand real quick. He's going to be sharing the message today. Our own Spidey, as you can see there up on the board. Honestly, I've got to know Bruce over the last couple years, and I get nothing but positivity and an uplifting, and you're just a positive person and somebody that we can look to for guidance. So I'm glad that you're sharing the message, sir. Checks in the mail, he said.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud, he's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Iceman and Firestar.
Where are you coming from, Spider-Man? Nobody knows who you are.
Okay, true believers, here he is, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
I think after that video, we should just have the closing song and get out of here, because I can't do anything better than what you just saw there. But maybe we can tune me down a little bit. Maybe I'm a little bit too loud. I can move this. But my name is Bruce Wechtenheiser, and for the past 56 years, I've been loving, collecting, and connecting with this character known as Spider-Man. And it only took me 52 of those years to finally get discovered. As you can see on the screen there, the man on the left, that's Brad Douglas. He has a very popular fan website for the past 26 years. He has a very well-watched YouTube channel, and that's what he interviewed me on remotely from 2 states away back in December of 2020. And we talked for 2 hours as I showed him my collection in my house and told my stories, my emotional stories. And for the whole 2 hours, my daughter, Noelle, was a videographer holding her cell phone. I still don't know how her arms weren't shaking at the end. She was a real trooper, but that was where I was discovered. And after 52 years, I was finally on a nation, or actually international level, that I still can't believe. I find it so hard to believe that people all over the world, maybe in Japan or England or anywhere, could turn on YouTube and hear me talking about Spider-Man for 2 hours or more, because there's been more interviews since then. Because to me, I'm still the same little kid that started as 4 years old, wearing the t-shirts, buying the toys, and collecting all the comic books and reading those. So to me, it's still unreal. I have to go back and look at Brad's YouTube channel to make sure that video really happened 4 years ago. And before we go any further, though, I do want to talk about a few disclaimers, because first of all, you might see a grown man cry tears of emotion, because it's the emotional stories that matter to me more than the material items. So if I start to cry, I have tissues. Don't worry about me. Also, what you see there on the screen, the items are not as important to me as the emotional stories and experiences I had in my lifetime, which I'll tell you about a little bit later today also. And finally, this is not the most important part of my life. Okay, I've had a lot of joy, a lot of high moments, a lot of fun with this love of Spider-Man for the past 56 years, but it's not the most important part of my life. And relationships by far are more important, especially my relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The relationship with my wife, my children, my grandchild, my relatives, my health, my friends, my job as a high school math teacher, all these things are much more important to me, but this has brought me a lot of joy, and I like to share that joy with other people. In fact, I definitely feel that this was part of God's plan for my life, one small part of my plan for my life. If I made a list of all the things I've done with Spider-Man over the last 56 years and showed it to you, you wouldn't believe it all happened to one person. Because I don't believe it, and it all happened to me. So if I don't believe it, I know you wouldn't believe it. But it did all happen to me, and I do believe that it was predestined, part of my life, to be intertwined with this character. I'll tell you about that more as we move on today. What you just heard, everybody, was my typical opening to a presentation I've been doing the last 2 years to live audiences in different settings. I'm not going to do the whole presentation today. Maybe we'll have a special night some night, a Spidey and me night here at Bridge to Life. We'll get the popcorn and everything else, and we can see the whole presentation. But what I am going to talk about today deals with this part of my life and this passion and this love that I've had. And the message I'm bringing today, as we saw on that one slide, was God's purposes in our lives, the plans that he's made for us, and trying to be an influence and helping other people in this world. How many of you out there believe that the things that happen in your ordinary life, the blessings that you receive, can minister to other people? Let's do a little survey. Yeah, I think all of us believe that. And even the small things in life and the blessings that have happened in this area of my life have ministered to other people. In fact, there's at least 3 churches, including ours in our area today, who are talking on a similar subject. Not Spider-Man, not superheroes, but as I was traveling the other day, I was going through Johnstown on Route 30, and I don't know the name of the church, but there's a small church on the left as I was heading towards Ligonier, and they had a church sign up, and I glanced over, and the sermon for them this week was, does God care about the little things in your life? Obviously, the answer is going to be yes, or they won't have a sermon there. No, okay, go home, everybody. So that was cool that I saw that they're talking about the little things, because the love of a superhero is a little thing. It's not one of the most important parts of my life. Another person from our congregation here, our membership, Jamie Helbig, is at a different church today, and her message is on using your creative gifts for God's purposes. So it's just kind of cool that at least 3 churches in our small area of Pennsylvania are talking on similar topics today. God does care about the little things in our lives, and I want to challenge you to think about how you can share the little things that God has done in your life to make a big impact on other people's lives. I do believe that God's plans unfold in the ordinary things that we do in our life every day, and that it unfolds in a powerful way. It's not always big and magnificent things that he's bringing to us, which are always cool, but it's the ordinary things that we need to look at for God's leadings. And I know that I don't look at them enough. This one area of my life I have examined and looked at and deciphered, but a lot of times I don't look for the leadings and the small things in life, and I want to encourage you all to do that today. Over the last 2 years, a lot of doors have been opened for me by God to minister to people in this way, and people here at Bridge to Life have been really good, encouraging supporters of that. In fact, Mike Berardi up here has the Spider brand clothing today as he's playing the drums. Chris Howard has always wanted me to come up here and do a message, so he's been a big supporter as well. A lot of people in the audience have given me a lot of positive feedback in the last 2 years, but nobody's been the bigger cheerleader than Pastor Chris Valente. He's a great cheerleader, and especially in this area of my life, but he heard my stories, he talked to me about it, he saw some of the articles written about me in newspapers as I've been doing these presentations, and he truly believed that my stories are really God's stories, that the theme of love of family, love of nostalgia, things from the past, living out your purpose and their passion in life. He wanted me to come here and share that message today. So I agreed to do it for him, of course, because he's my pastor, but he's a great guy, and I just want to let you know that there are things in this message today that really do have to do a lot with God, not just Spider-Man and not just superheroes. When I posted on Facebook earlier this week that I'd be doing the message today, one of my friends, he lives states away, but we've become friends the last couple of years because of our Spidey love. He had such a nice comment. I'd like to read it to you. He said, "Your stories are not about comic books or even Spider-Man. Those are just backdrops to the wonderful blessings that God has bestowed upon you, and that you are wise and observant enough to record, appreciate, and share with others." So what Pastor Chris saw is what my friend Werner Graff also saw, and I hope that you folks can see some of that in some of the stories I share later today. But actually, this is the second sermon I've ever done about Spider-Man in my lifetime. The first one happened 22 years ago. When the first Spider-Man movie came out, I had a professionally designed costume that you probably saw in part of that video, so that I could make appearances in Johnstown as Johnstown Spider-Man. Well, my pastor at the time, he's actually the founding pastor of this church. Pastor Jim Lockery, he was pastoring at Oakland United Methodist at the time, and he found out about the costume. He called me up excitedly one night, and he said, Bruce, you got to come on Sunday. Help me do the kids' sermon at the church. Come in the costume. And I said, okay, since you're the pastor, I'll do that for you. So I went and I did the sermon with him, and the kids' sermon, and the kids were all excited and so into it. And the biggest kid that was into it and so excited was Pastor Jim Lockery himself. So he was very, very excited about Spider-Man showing up for the sermon with the kids that day. But I want to give you a little bit of background about how this Spidey and Me presentation started, and it's really firmly grounded in the Lord. When that video came out with Brad and I for 2 hours, and I watched it back right away to see how it went, I had so much joy and so much satisfaction from telling the stories that I did. Not just my material item, but the emotional connections that I have with the character. It gave me more satisfaction than I ever expected from that interview. I thought it was just going to be all about the stuff, but it turned out to be more about the stories that God had given me, the content that God had given me. So I thought, well, it's going to kind of get boring, answering the same questions in interviews all the time. So I looked for another idea of a way to get my stories out in a different way. And I kept praying and brainstorming, and it really wasn't coming to me. Like, well, what should I do next? What's the next right step, God? What do you want me to do? So it was kind of, the presentation idea was kind of birthed right here in Bridge to Life Church. And I told Alex as a spoiler that I was going to mention him during the sermon today, and he came up to me before the service today and wanted to make sure that it didn't mean he was going to have to put on the tights. So I said, no. I said, well, what's wrong with that, though, Alex? But no, it's not the tights. But I was going to a small group that Alex and Christy were leading right downstairs, right beneath us, where we're standing right now. We had a small group going on in the spring of 2022, and we'd have a meal together, great times, and they were great leaders, and we would break into smaller groups to talk about important things that were happening in our lives. And at that time, I had been in a couple interviews on TV, news stories, or magazines, or newspaper articles because they saw my YouTube video. And I felt like there was something more coming. So I just felt the urge to share that with my small group that night. And as I was telling them, there's more to come with the Spider-Man stuff, I started to get choked up. My voice was cracking. I'm getting tears in my eyes. They're probably thinking, what is going on here? This grown man's crying about Spider-Man in our group. But Alex was kind enough to support me and to stay with me and not run out of the room and get some help for me that night. But so, I really wanted to share that with the group. I just couldn't stop it from coming out, even though it sounded so strange to me. People were talking about really important parts of their life, and I'm talking about Spider-Man. But a few days later, the idea came to me. Finally, I'm a smart guy after all these days of praying that, hey, I should go to comic book conventions where there's superhero fans there, of course, and tell my stories in the side rooms where they do panels of interviews and things or presentations. So this idea finally came to me, why didn't I do this 20 years ago? I've been a fan for 52 years by that point. Why didn't I do it? Well, the Bible really has something to say about why I didn't do it 20 years ago. In Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11, it says, God makes everything happen at the right time. So 20 years before that wasn't the right time for me. There were still a lot of blessings that happened in those 20 years that came after that I needed to tell people about when I went to my presentations. In fact, the most popular probably verse in Ecclesiastes that most of us know is in the first verse of that chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. So there are seasons in our lives, everybody, where God has plans for us and purposes for us. It's not maybe a lifelong plan, but there are seasons when he wants to use us for different purposes and different plans. So I encourage you to look for that. As an example of a season in my life, some of you in the room may not know this, but 37 years ago, I was employed full-time in ministry. For 5 years, I was at Oakland United Methodist Church as a youth pastor and doing ministry to college students at UPJ. And I loved it, man. I loved waking up every morning. Maybe it was the afternoon I was waking up because I was on campus until all hours of the night visiting people and sharing Jesus with people. But I look forward to that job so much and that ministry. And it was so great because they also gave me classes which counted towards credits if I wanted to finish a ministry degree to become a pastor. So as I was nearing the end of those 5 years, I prayed about it, and I just didn't feel the calling to become a pastor. It just didn't feel right to me. So I kept praying, and God led me to a different ministry field. He led me to public education. So I've been a high school teacher for the past 30 years at Westmont High School, and that was my ministry field. And I really felt confirmed in that by slowly going back to school and going through classes, but that was my ministry field. So the season of my life was to become a teacher, not to become a pastor. But just to let you know, guys, that there is ministry for all of us. You don't have to be a full-time pastor. We all have ministry in our lives in some way, shape, or form. But after getting confirmation to do these presentations, I went full steam ahead. And you can see on the screen there, I started a website, so I looked like I was a pro, even though I never did a presentation before in my life. I wanted to look like I'd done it for years. I got this commissioned artwork done of a cartoon style of me, what I would be doing at the presentations. I would project images on the screen like what I'm doing here. I bring a few items to show the crowd, and I tell my emotional stories. And I intentionally created my presentation to have something for a general audience. Because at comic book conventions, people get dragged along that don't want to be there sometimes, like spouses, boyfriend or girlfriend, or grandparent, and they're just there to support their comic book loving family members. So they get dragged in there. I want something to minister to them. So I created stories that are emotional, and I see people welling up with tears. I create some funny stories, I hear the laughter, or some jaw-dropping stories, and I see jaws drop. So it's kind of fun to see the reactions in people's faces as my presentations go on. So the past 2 years I've been doing this, going to conventions, but it all started in Johnstown. My world premiere of my presentation was downtown at a small gaming shop at the time where they play card games and board games, and they had a really small convention, but they let me come and do my presentations there. And it was kind of cool because, it was right here in Johnstown, and I got all set up, and they told me they had a projector and everything, so I got there, and their projector was this little box that looked like a toy. And I tried to project my slides like what we're doing today. It wasn't working. All they did with that projector was they shot a timer onto the wall, like red numbers with a countdown for the games they were playing. So it was like no quality for my images. So I needed a superhero to come save me that day, and it wasn't going to be Spider-Man, but I had a superhero from our own Bridge to Life family come and save me that day, and that was, anybody want to guess? Not Pastor Chris. Tyler Roxby was my superhero. He came with the audio-visual equipment, and he allowed the projector and the audio equipment to work greatly that day. So Tyler was one of my superheroes, got me started on the road with how to put the wires in. I need to take pictures of it so I know how to do it when I'm on my own. Where to put this wire, that wire, to have my audio and video equipment going. So I appreciate Tyler and the support he's given me. But as I started to apply to conventions, a phrase came to me that Pastor Chris has mentioned to me many times in the last few years. Maybe he's mentioned it to you. Have you heard him say God's favor? God's favor in your life? And he truly believes that at different times, God, in an extraordinary way, will bring favor. He'll give you an opportunity and things that wouldn't normally happen. And things will go well in that season of your life. God's favor is upon you. God's favor is upon you. Well, I started landing opportunities to go and do my presentations when other people were not being accepted. I would apply to promoters. They'd say yes. I'd show up. I'd do my presentation in the side room. And I started to talk to these other veteran presenters or veteran panelists, if you will. And they were all amazed that a rookie was getting into these conventions. And I said, what's the big deal? I'm applying. I'm getting accepted. They said, well, you don't understand, Bruce. 2 years ago, 2020, conventions were shut down because of COVID. they were shut down for a couple of years. I said, I didn't know. I hadn't gone to conventions. I'm raising a family and doing other important things in life. And they said, well, we're all trying to get back in, and some of us are getting rejected, and you're going everywhere you want to go. And I said, I never knew. I just applied for conventions, guys. I don't know. So I didn't realize that how much God's favor was with me. So I was getting into these conventions when other people weren't. And in fact, I've been to 25 conventions in the past 2 years of doing this. And I've told my story, my Spidey and me story, 30 times. I did the math before this to make it sound more impressive today, guys. But sometimes I do it more than once at the same convention. But it's just been a real blessing, and I'll never take any of this for granted. I'm just a fan. I'm not a comic book professional. I haven't written a comic book. You definitely don't want to see me draw. I can't even draw a stick person. I'm not an artist, and I've never been in a movie. So I'm not part of the industry. I'm just a fan. So I'll never take it for granted, and it's just really humbling for me to get into these places and talk to people. What's also humbling is when I'm done with my presentation, even like today, I have a few props, but I have some more if you want to come up and see them later on in a box down here. But I have all my props, and I let people come up and look at them, take pictures, or talk to me, ask me questions while I'm tearing down frantically my equipment so the next person can get up there on this in the room. But sometimes they come up for a totally different purpose, and it totally floors me. Some of them come up just to tell me thank you for saying that your relationship with Jesus is the most important part of your life. So it just, it just makes me so emotional that they could leave. They can go out the door, but they come up to say thank you for saying that. They probably didn't care anything about the Spider-Man part, but they cared that I would mention my relationship with my Lord and Savior. Also, a lot of people come up to me and they say, man, we love the passion, the joy that you showed in this presentation today. And that's what they really attracted them to the presentation. And last week, if you were here, Dave and Sharon Thomas shared about joy. And I loved their presentation, their message last week so much. And they mentioned how the joy is something that's different than happiness. Joy is embedded deep inside of you. And that's really what I want people to see when I do my presentation. I want them to see the joy that I have for my family, the love of family, for the nostalgia in my life, for good times from the past. And I want them to kind of think back to their own families, to their own nostalgia, to the old simpler times of life, and be ministered to in that way as well. So I'm going to share with you a couple examples of the stories I tell and see if they minister to you in any way like they do to the audiences that I go to, and see if you can see the God themes coming through with them. First of all, my family was involved in me first loving Spider-Man in the first place. I was 4 years old. My siblings said, hey, Bruce, come over here and check out this cartoon, something they normally would say. And they said, it's Spider-Man. And I thought, what in the world is Spider-Man? So I went over, started watching it. We had that cool theme song at the beginning here. The movements, everything was something was different with this cartoon. And it just attached to me. The character just attached to me that day. And a few months later, in addition to my family helping me fall in love with the character, my brother came home from one of the corner stores with this comic book. And this is my first ever Spider-Man comic book that I received as a kid. And I've kept it all these years. I drew all over it as a kid and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't know there were Spider-Man comic books out there. So I'm like, I want more of these things. So that's got me into collecting Spider-Man things. And what's really cool about this that I share, it's kind of a minor miracle that I have this with me today, because I didn't realize that I was the youngest of 4 or 5 years old. I didn't realize that my dad was an alcoholic and things weren't going so well, but I didn't see any evidence of it. But my mom, she put up with it as long as she could, but she couldn't do it anymore. So one day he went to work, and he didn't know it. None of us kids knew it, but we were moving while he was at work. So we didn't move that far away, only about 2 or 3 blocks away. But our neighbors had a pickup truck. They helped us frantically make a move. We couldn't grab everything in those hours, but we had to get out of there before he got home. And someone thought enough about my love of Spider-Man, and they loved me, and they grabbed my small stack of comic books. So the fact that this thing still exists today is a minor miracle that I have my first ever Spider-Man comic book. And that story alone ministers to people when I go to tell my presentations, in addition to the 10 or 12 other ones that I get to tell, but I'm not telling that many today. You guys are going to come to a convention sometime and check me out. The other thing about my mom, she was raising 4 kids on her own. working at Gloucester Brothers downtown on a minimum wage salary. She was a great mom. She did as much as she could, but a lot of my father figures were the superheroes. And the virtues that I read in those comic books, I wanted those in my life. So I pretty much grew up like a Boy Scout, with a lot of these superhero virtues. I wanted to be Spider-Man so bad at the age of 4 that I just clung on to those things as much as I could. But my mom was a real sport. Everybody knew I wanted to be Spider-Man. I was climbing the pipes in our house, the heating pipes and everything like that as a 4-year-old. Well, eventually, she bought me a store-bought Halloween costume of Spider-Man. I kind of looked like my favorite superhero, and she was a real sport because those costumes weren't the greatest. They really weren't the greatest. So I asked her to sew me a mask to go with the store-bought costume. Let's check out this costume, guys. And at this time, I'm 8 years old, and it wasn't good enough, though, the costume. It had yellow on the chest. There's no yellow in Spider-Man's costume, but they don't want you to get hit by a car at night when you're trick-or-treating, so that was reflective material. And the second part of these costumes, I have it with me now, guys, which was really bad, was the masks. Anybody remember these old Halloween masks from the Ben Cooper costume? I see the older people shaking your heads. The front looks cool, but the back, there's no back. Just a rubber band that went around your head, and that was painful sometimes. It got caught in your hair, and you're trying to take it off, and you're pulling hair out. But you can't see Spider-Man's hair. That's not the real Spider-Man. I wanted to be the real Spider-Man. So I begged my mom, as busy as she was, please, please, sew me a real Spider-Man mask out of material that covers the back of my head. And she did it. You can see it on the screen there. She did it. She was a good mom. She sewed me the mask. But let's be honest, everybody. She wasn't the greatest seamstress in the world. Come on. That's an upside-down lunch bag right there. That's what that is. And my head stopped right about there. So I had an extra foot of material flapping in the wind as I walked down Main Street in the Halloween parade, after I protected the jewelry store for a couple hours, of course. But I was just so happy to have that mask. And I shouldn't really make fun of my mom's sewing skills, because as bad as she was as a seamstress, I was 40 times as bad as the artist, because I put the eyes and webs on that thing with markers. And I was terrible, guys. I'm not an artist. But she was a real sport. You can see her dressed as a ringmaster up on that last slide. She went to the Cub Scout party with me, dressed as a ringmaster. My brother made her the costume, but she was a real sport. And great mother. She supported my hobby and my love of Spider-Man. This, what you see on the screen, I walked through GB store up in Richland. I'm going back in time to all the famous stores in town, Gloucester Brothers and GB. And I went through their holiday set up for toys and things in the toy department, making a Christmas wish list. And I'm putting down things, and I see this beautiful item that you see on the screen there. It's an AM radio. AM was king back then, everybody. No FM, AM radio in the shape of Spider-Man. And I flip it over and look at the price tag, and it was very, very expensive. Good toys at the time were maybe $5 or $6 for really good toys. This thing was like $20 or $25. So my heart sunk knowing that we didn't have a lot of money. I put it on my wish list, but I felt badly that I did that, because I knew my mom would probably be sad when I was disappointed on Christmas morning that it wasn't there. But being the good mother that she was, she somehow sacrificed and stretched the budget of our family, and it was under the Christmas tree. And I still have it here with me today. So when I'm in interviews and people always ask you, what's your favorite item in your collection? And I showed them this, and they're like, well, it's a little radio. I said, yeah, well, and I explained the emotional part, and I get choked up. But that's the most emotional piece, because I know that she had to sacrifice a lot to get me that one. So people can relate to a lot of these stories, and like I say, I see them laughing, smiling, welling up with tears at times. Also, in addition to all these emotional things, a lot of cool things happen to me, unique things that I can't talk about today in our time together, because we don't want to be here all day. But so many unique things happen. But finally, 24 years into loving Spider-Man, something happened that really opened my eyes a lot. And one of the most incredible experiences that really opened my eyes happened when I was 28 years old. I made a discovery. And this man that you see on the screen here, Steve Ditko, he was the co-creator of Spider-Man. Spider-Man started in the comic books, and he drew the first 3 years of comic books, about 38 issues. He did all the artwork, came up with a lot of the stories, and Stan Lee wrote the words and the word balloons, and they were a great team, but Steve Ditko was the main creator. Well, I'm 28. I bought a trading card set of Spider-Man, all Spider-Man on the cards, flipped them over. They had fun facts and trivia on the back, and I flipped one over, and I'm reading it. I knew all the trivia. I'm a walking encyclopedia of Spider-Man. I'm bored. I had to look twice. I had to blink 20 times. It said Steve Ditko was born in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I had to blink because I thought maybe I made that up on my own. No one told me I am Spider-Man. No one told me I'm living in the hometown of the creator of Spider-Man. No one talked about it. He was a very private individual. But this really opened my eyes. I became a Christian at the age of 20. I'm 28 now. I'm finally catching on. I'm like, hey, Bruce, God really has predestined this to be a part of your life. Not only you're a Spider-Man fan, you're living in the co-creator's hometown. You're doing all these other things. And, it's just amazing to me that, I'm getting, it's just so meaningful to me that God finally brought that to my attention that, I'm getting goosebumps up here telling you these stories about Steve Ditko, and I told these stories many, many times, but the last few years we started to celebrate Steve in town. Maybe you saw the giant mural downtown. How many have seen that beautiful Spider-Man 28-foot-high mural? Well, I painted that mural, guys. Well, one little square of red paint on the biggest spider. I painted on that little red square because community members were allowed to paint on it. But by the Bottle Works director, the Athletic Arts Center downtown, he's the one that contacted the Ditko family and worked things out with them. And we've done a lot of things with the Ditkos to honor Steve. And through that, though, I've gotten to become friends with Steve Ditko's nieces and nephews and his brother, who just passed away this summer at the age of 86. Pat Ditko, he just passed away. He was a famous architect in our city. A lot of the famous buildings around are his footprint. They'll be here forever. That's Steve Ditko's brother. And it was kind of cool. About 3 months ago, I was at the post office dropping off some packages, and I hear a voice in the background saying, "Hey, Bruce, how are you?" I look around. It's Pat Ditko, Steve's brother. "I didn't recognize you without the costume." So Steve Ditko's brother's joking around with me at the post office. So all these things have happened that just brought me so much joy. Meeting Stan Lee, as you can see on the screen there. My girlfriend went with me to Pittsburgh Comic Con back in 1996, stood in line for hours, took this picture, and this picture wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to be taking a picture with Stan because they were on a timer, but I knew the promoter, and she let me run behind, so that's probably the only picture taken with Stan that day, so again, God's favor. But my girlfriend was such a trooper that she's still with me today. So I knew she was a keeper after she took that picture. And the man there on the right side is John Romita. He's a famous artist. He came on right after Steve Ditko left the book, and he did about 5 or 6 years of great comics and very iconic issues. And I got the chance to go to his house. That's his living room. So another friend of mine was close friends with his family, and I begged him to take me on the trip to see him, to visit him. And we went actually on the last trip that my friend made to his house. And you can see it's just a traditional house with the red carpeting and the organ in the background. But I couldn't believe that I was in the house with John Romita and his wife. I couldn't even make sentences, guys. I'm a pretty good speaker. I couldn't even form a sentence that day. I'm with John Romita in his house. And another beautiful thing about the presentations, everybody, is not only do I get to talk about these famous people and my wife and my mother, but I get to talk about other members of my family. And the love that we have for each other and the love and the fun that we've had with this character over the years. In fact, my mother-in-law is here. She gets me a Hallmark ornament every year to decorate my Spidey tree. It's in my basement. It has to be in the basement. And my sister-in-law brought me a Spidey gift from, she came in from Indiana and wasn't around for my birthday. She brought me some Spidey action figures. So the family is always supportive of my hobby. But what you see there on the screen, I bought this on the streets of Somerset back in 1996 when they bring in antique dealers and they're out in the streets with tables. And this is the only item I found all day that was Spider-Man. And I didn't know what it was. I never saw it before. It was from 1972. It was an ashtray. I thought I overpaid for it, everybody, for $45, but it was the only Spider-Man thing I was buying that day, so I went home with it. About 2 weeks, maybe a month later, I get a call on the phone from another collector, and he educates me. And he heard that I had it and from other friends, and he told me it was only meant for employees of Marvel Comics, given out at a Christmas party. So pretty rare. And then he proceeds to offer me thousands of dollars for it. And I never sold anything from my collection to this point, but I wasn't against the idea. And so he offered me a couple $1,000, and I did end up selling that item. So as soon as I got that money, I immediately used it for something really, really good, guys. I bought an engagement ring right away. Right away, I bought an engagement ring, and you could see it there on Blythe's finger. There's the ashtray, the ring right there. And she was such a good sport. She let me wear the cufflinks to the wedding too. The Spidey cufflinks are right there. But so either I'm a really great guy and I sold an expensive item, or I'm a really cheap guy and paid $45 for an engagement ring, guys, right? So I'm one or the other. Maybe I'm both. Maybe I'm a little frugal. But, you could see that, Spider-Man has meant a lot to us and even involved in the engagement ring and the wedding ring. And my kids, my poor kids, they couldn't avoid it. They were indoctrinated into the Spidey love at an early age, and they continued it on. But as you can see there on the left, there's Noelle. When she was 2.5 years old, she memorized all the lines to all the Spider-Man movies up to that point and could recite them. She didn't even know what the words meant, but she could recite all the lines. And in more recent years, she got her first tattoo. It was Spider-Man, of course, in tribute to the love that we have of Spider-Man. And on the right there, that big guy there is Mark. He graduated from high school a year ago, and he played for Richland High School, and their colors were red and blue. I promise you I didn't buy the house in the district just because the colors matched the Spidey costume colors, but he was a really good pitcher for them. And around the time he started pitching in high school, I was becoming known in the community because of the different news stories. So his teammates started calling him Spidey. And then, all of a sudden, he was pitching against the crosstown rivals, and I saw a T-shirt here today, Bishop McCourt Crushers. And while he's pitching in the first inning, they're trying to rattle him by calling him Spidey. Hey, Spidey, Spidey, Spidey on the mound. And he strikes out the first batter pretty easily. And he turns and shoots the web on the whole bench of players from Bishop McCourt. And I'm up in the stands, I'm laughing. My wife's like, what did he just do? I said, he just shot the webs on the whole team. For some reason, they stopped calling him Spidey that day. I don't know why, but so you can see that we've had a lot of love and we've had a lot of embracing of the Spidey stuff over the years at different times. But I do have a new protege, my newest Spidey protege, and he's in the house today, is my grandson Hudson. He's 5 years old, and 5 years old. Yeah, he's a little small for 5 years old. He's 5 months old, and I have no idea who bought him those outfits. I really don't know where he got those Spidey outfits, but one of his favorite TV shows that we watch when he needs to watch some shows is the new Spidey and His Amazing Friends. He loves that one. So we have a lot of love in our family for Spidey and for each other. And as I mentioned earlier, other things have been happening since the presentation. More momentum has continued to come, more of God's favor, and even more opportunities have been coming my way, amazingly, for just this fan from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. As you can see on the screen, I've been in different newspaper articles. I still can't believe it. I can't believe when I see myself on a TV show being interviewed. And I really can't believe when I'm in a total stranger's happy ad in the Tribune Democrat, as you see up in the right-hand corner. I'm opening the paper one day, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's me. So this guy had a birthday, a 65th birthday, and there was a picture taken with me at the Arts Center one year, and they used it in the newspaper. So all these funny things and these great things have been happening, and I'll never take it for granted, guys, and just very humbling to me. Even after all these things that you see on this screen, God wasn't done opening doors for me, giving me other avenues of sharing my joy and ministering to people in this lifelong passion I've had for a superhero. As you see on the left there, the Cambria County Historical Society reached out to me. So it was a mainstream event, guys. They unlocked the doors of the Comic-Con and let me go out into the mainstream once in a while. And I went to a spring history talk to talk about Steve Ditko and Spider-Man. Typically, they talk about things that happened in Cambria County during the Civil War or the Johnstown floods, historical things. But they recognize Steve Ditko and Spider-Man as history. So I was honored to go there and talk at a history talk for the Cambria County Historical Society. And then on the right, there was a 2-day academic conference held at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And they had people from around the world submit these abstracts, these ideas of coming to talk for 15 minutes about how Spider-Man fits into popular culture in an academic setting. And people did come from all around the world. And they reached out to me to come as a keynote speaker. And they gave me 45 minutes. So I got 3 times as much time as they did to do my Spidey and Me presentation. But it was just so incredible to me, again, honoring to me that this is, to me, it was the Spidey Super Bowl right here. This is the Super Bowl of Spidey events. A 2-day conference at a college. I could never imagine this as a kid. So I had to be there, and it was just cool to be there telling my stories to that kind of a crowd of people from all around the world. So when I think about all these events and all these activities, really, though, it's relationships that my life was really all about, like I said earlier. So with relationships, I've had a chance to meet a lot of people over the years, form friendships with people. Some of the friends that I've met actually have been Christians, too. So I've met some good Christian brothers and sisters. Some of them open up their homes to me. They let me stay with them when I go to their town to do a convention, so I don't have to go to a hotel. Hospitality, friendship, and the man that I mentioned earlier that had the nice sayings about me on Facebook, he recently asked me to join a board of directors at the Graff Dairy Hero Foundation. He started, his name's Graff, and his family used to run a dairy in Indiana. So he started this Graff Dairy Hero Foundation. He gave up all his collectibles, all his stuff, superhero items that were more expensive than mine, and he had more items than me. He gave them up so that we can eventually form a permanent museum in Indiana. And his goal is that when kids come in there to see stuff from the 60s and 70s that inspired us to heroic virtues, that young people today will be inspired to heroic virtues through this museum. And whatever money we bring in, we're going to give it out to charity groups. But he's a Christian, and he's a good guy, but I can't believe that he asked a guy from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a collector, to be on this board of directors. Again, another blessing in my life. But as you people probably know, because I know you read every word of my Facebook post that I put up there, you probably remember my tagline at the end of my post, right? Who wants to shout it out? Go ahead, I'll wait. At least one person, reads them. You got them. I'm going to start coming around asking you at your house if you read the tagline that I always use is living my blessed Spidey life with the little hands emojis, because I do consider it a great blessing to have all these things in my life that I can share with people. And I want people to know my faith is the most important thing. So I'm living my blessed Spidey life is what I usually say at the end of my tagline. And yes, everybody, I thought about writing a book all those couple years ago, and finally the book has been finished. It's been edited a couple times. Now I'm educating myself about finding an agent to get it published. But the cool thing about the book is I can expand my stories, and I expand my beliefs in God and how my relationship with Jesus is important to me. So it gets expanded in the book. So I'm looking forward to the book coming out. But all these things, guys, blessings, looking for God's favor. As the band comes back up to the stage, I want to encourage you just with a couple of scriptures as they're getting back up here for our final song. But let me encourage you all to continue to seek out God's plans and purposes in your lives, the blessings that you can share with other people and make an impact in what you might think is something ordinary is really extraordinary. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 say, "Wait for the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all that you do, and he will direct your paths." All that you do. Ephesians 2:10, God has plans which he has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Like I said, I truly believe the Spidey stuff was predestined, and I'm just trying to walk in it the way God wants me to. And finally, guys, Psalms 25, 8, and 9 has really spoken to me the last 2 years. He leads the humble in what is right, and he teaches the humble his way. This means that humility of heart is really important to let God lead you and direct us in our lives. And he will personally guide us in the ways he wants us to go, uniquely, individually, through the Holy Spirit that he leads us through, guys. He's going to use the circumstances of our lives, the common, ordinary things, the blessings, to be blessings to other people. And the final point I want to bring up is the motto of Spider-Man. Who wants to shout that out? If you're a Spidey fan out there, what's the famous motto of Spider-Man that they mention in the movies from time to time? Oh, I heard it. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. And he learned that at a painful cost, as a fictional character. But we have the greatest power of all within us. When we become Christians, when we have the Holy Spirit in our lives, there's no greater power than that, everybody. And with that power in our lives, we do have a responsibility. We don't have to be a pastor. We don't have to be in full-time ministry. But we do have a responsibility to let people know what God has done in our lives. We don't need to know every scripture. We don't have to quote scripture. But if we can tell the blessings of our lives to other people, that will impact them. That will open up the doors to deeper conversations about our faith. And that will open up the chance for them to become a Christian and to spend all of eternity with all of us in heaven. So as we wrap up here, I want to encourage you to continually seek out God's leadings in your life. If you want some prayer about that, we'll have people up front for you to pray with. If you're trying to figure out what is this season in your life, what purpose and plans does God have for you in this season of your life, please come forward for prayer. That's where it all starts, everybody. That's where all the leadings of God starts, through prayer. So I want to thank you for the chance to share these blessings that I've had, thanks to a superhero connection, and I pray blessings upon all of you today. Thank you. I think we can see why we were voted simply the best place to worship in Johnstown. And it's not because of their great ability and their great singing voices. It's because of the words that they lead us into every week. And that's what it's all about. We don't even need a sermon most weeks. We could just one song, if we unpack the words, giving the highest glory to the highest King. That's what we're all about. And that's ironically how we're tying in the theme of with great power, there comes great responsibility. We've got the great power of the highest King in us. Our responsibility is to let that love, that ministry to others pour out from our lives. So go out there, folks. Use your responsibility this week. God bless.